Yeah, several of you asked me recently about multiple offer situations, and we know this is happening across the country in a big way because inventory has compressed. Sellers have been a little bit reluctant to come on the market. Buyers are still out in force. They're sopping up every single piece of real estate out there, and so a lot of multiple offers are happening, especially on any listings that do come to market. So if you have a buyer that is coming in to write an offer and you're expecting multiple offers, how do you position your offer to win? How do you get in a position to put your buyer in that position of getting acceptance? I'm going to cover a few ideas this morning really quickly, really rapidly, that might be able to help you. And we're going to start with just talking about some simple things, but some powerful things. One of the first things we should always do when we're preparing to write an offer is call the other agent and ask them some basic questions. When we don't do this, we're really failing in our fiduciary duties to our clients. So an example of that would be if I'm calling the other agent, I'm going to say, hey, I'm just calling, I have a buyer that's has some interest in the property. We have also are looking at a few more. Never reveal that they're completely vested in this property. But I was wondering if you could just answer a couple quick questions for me. They're going to say, sure. I'm going to say, well, can I ask you, are you expecting offers on this property? You have multiple offers going now, or do you have any offers coming in? And get that piece of information from them. Ask about what the seller's motivation is. Can I ask why the seller is selling? They may answer, they may not. Can I ask, does the seller have any time constraints in terms of closing? Do they want to rent back the property after closing? Any inclusions, exclusions I should know about? Anything not on the disclosure statement that I should know about? Anything you can tell me that would help me if we do decide to write an offer on the property? So ask those questions. They may or may not answer, but the key is you got to have a process behind you, how you write every offer. And one of those processes should be asking the other side a series of questions. Next thing we should think about is how we're going to position our offer. And positioning our offer is super important. And it starts really at your first client meeting. So when you're talking to your buyers, before you ever go out and look at properties, you want to explain the market conditions. And what I mean by that is you want them to come in knowing full well what to expect when they do write an offer. A lot of buyers right now might assume that COVID is causing sellers to discount their price. We need to educate them that that's absolutely not happening. Prices are still rising, may rise further because of this increased demand out there. And the best way you can demonstrate this is with good statistics. So the way you say this to a buyer is, hey, before we go out and look at property, I just want to bring you up to speed on what's happening in the market. So last month, and you just bring up your monthly stats, last month we had 322 sales, 122 new listings or 222 new listings. Sellers on average are getting 98% of list price. Some are getting over list price when they price it really right. Multiple offers are really common right now in our market. And the average market time for a property in our market is about 55 days or whatever the numbers are. So lay them out, paint a picture so that clients don't come in and say, I want to offer 85% of list price. You can say, well, remember when we talked, the average is 98%. A lot of sellers are getting over full price. So you want to lay that groundwork early, right in the beginning of the relationship. Also, as you go out and look at properties, even when they don't buy a property that they've seen, you want to let them know what happened with that property later on. So you might do a quick search and say, remember the property we looked at yesterday? Got multiple offers. Remember that property we looked at last night at 4 o'clock? Already has an offer on it. So you want to show them the speed of the market. Next is when you're getting down to write that offer, the worst thing you can do is to take out that offer form and say, what would you like to offer? You never do that. What you're going to do is let's take a look at what's happening in the neighborhood. Let's look at all the sold properties, the active properties. Let me call that other agent and find out what's going on, and then we can talk about a strategy. You never just act as a scribe or dictate what the buyer wants to write, because they're always going to do this. They're just going to look up and think for a second, and then they're going to use the PFA method. The PFA method is they're going to pull from air. They're just going to make it up as they go based on absolutely nothing. And then they'll position themselves around this fake number that has no meaning. You can't do that. Another thing you might do when you're talking to that other agent is ask them how they arrived at the price. Make that one of your last questions because you don't want it to be confrontational at all. You can frame it up this way and say, hey, if I'm explaining your property to my buyer, I'd love to just kind of understand how you guys came to some price for everybody, something that's a win-win for everybody. What caused you to price the property in this way? Next, talk about earnest money. Your earnest money is really critical because it shows the strength of the buyer. If you come in and offer $500 earnest money on a $500,000 house, probably not going to be too impressive. $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 is going to be much stronger when you're bringing that offer to these folks. So look at the amount of earnest money that you're putting forward, and don't just go in at the least amount. In fact, when you're in a multiple offer situation, think about increasing it to show you have a strong buyer. Another thing that a lot of people are doing in a lot of markets is they are doing early release of earnest money. So this means that upon acceptance, we're going to release X dollars to you just for accepting our offer. We know there's other contingencies that have to happen for us to proceed with the sale, but because you accept it, we're going to release $2,000 to you. We're going to release $1,500 to you. Now that is risky, we get it, but we're looking for ways that we can lock up the property. Just talking to my good friend Dan Lesniak on a podcast that we did, and in one of his buyer's agents last week had 22 offers on a home he was competing with to try to get in position to win. So, looking at all angles, you got to put everything on the table. Something else to think about is removing inspection contingencies or appraisal contingencies. And you may not remove them all the way, but you could limit them and have them shorter time frames. Instead of being 12 days, make them 5 days. Instead of, as long as you have a relationship with an inspector that can get it done that fast. Some people will say, we'll waive the appraisal contingency. And that means that if I get a low appraisal, I'm accepting it. I'm going to make up the difference. You're seeing that in a lot of busy markets. These all include risk. So it's risk versus reward. Does your buyer want to risk that in order to have the reward of getting the property? It's all going to be determined by their comfort level with the risk. And we're explaining the risk. We're just walking them through the options, right? You can also do a little bit of a caveat to that. You could say, well, waive the appraisal contingency up to a certain amount. So the buyer agrees to, go within 10% of list price or 5% of list price. As long as the property appraises for within 10% of list price, they'll waive the appraisal contingency. By the way, all the things I'm talking about, make sure you run by your principal broker, your supervising broker, to make sure it's legal and appropriate in your state and they feel comfortable with it as a brokerage. Something else you could think about doing is having the buyer write a letter to the seller. That's a common thing we've heard for years, but those emotional letters can actually help. And you tell your buyer's story, why they're excited about moving this, why they chose this home over other homes in the market, why they feel like this is the right home, the right neighborhood for them and their family can be really impactful, especially if a family is leaving. So writing that letter can be something you want to do. Also, if your buyer has been pre-qualified with an online lender, huge red flag for a lot of listing agents. For me especially, if you had an online lender like Quicken Loans or something like this, I would probably not accept your offer over another offer that was from a local lender that was in similar price, right? So if your buyer says, I'm going to use Quicken Loans or some online lender, I would say, let's get pre-qualified with a local lender so we can show that to the listing agent so they feel comfortable that you've actually talked to a local lender. A lot of sellers won't accept an online lender. So I would highly recommend you get pre-qualified with a local lender. A lot of them are super competitive and it will really strengthen your offer. Of course, if they have cash, provide those proof of funds with your offer so you can show that. And then some of the things you can do too to really separate yourself is highlight your personal close rate. So if I can say to the other agent, listen, last 12 months, I closed 98% of the sales I put into escrow. I pride myself on getting every deal to the closing table, to the finish line. If we work together, I promise you, I will leave no stone unturned to get this transaction closed. That's a powerful message, and that'll influence not just the agent, but also the agent might communicate that to the seller, as opposed to maybe somebody else writing an offer that doesn't have that kind of track record. You can definitely set you apart. What you're really trying to do here is to create certainty. And certainty is so important with the seller. What can you do to help them feel better and more certain about the possibility of getting this sale closed? And of course, everybody thinks it's always going to be about price, but not necessarily. There's other factors that can play into it, like that timeline. Maybe you can allow the seller to rent back if that's something that's a value to them. So we're looking for other things sometimes that will be a motivator for the client to accept your offer. So those are a few ideas to think about as you're writing your multiple offers. One other thing I'm going to leave you with too is an escalation clause. In a lot of markets, people use escalation clauses. And this is where you come in at a price, I'm just going to use a round number of, let's say $200,000. But your buyer agrees to go up to $220,000. And here's how they'll do it. They'll do $1,000 more than the next competing offer. Has to be verified competing offer. Could be higher, could be lower. These numbers could change, but it caps out at the 220. My explanation to my buyer would be, listen, what we're trying to do is to get you in position to win this bid, so you have the opportunity to lock up the house so no other buyers are there. Once we've locked it up, we still have contingencies. We have an inspection contingency. If we've left the appraisal contingency, we still have that. So we have some ways that we can, escape if you wanted to escape. But the most important consideration is getting you locked into this house, so we move all the other buyers to the sidelines. It's really a powerful thing. So if you left the appraisal contingency, that's your backstop. And so the backstop is, if it doesn't appraise, we have an opportunity to renegotiate. So some things to think about. Hopefully that helps you out there in the negotiations and the multiple offers that we're dealing with across the country. Hope you have a fantastic day. Good selling. We'll see you next time over at eRealEstateCoach.com.